Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Corporal Chris Marshall, Provincial Public Information Officer for the Nova Scotia RCMP, and I'll be your moderator for this media availability. Bonjour et bienvenue. Je suis le caporal Chris Marshall, l'agent d'information provincial pour la GRC en Nouvelle-Écosse, et je serai le modérateur pour ce point de presse. I acknowledge that we're in Mi'kmaq, the traditional and unceded ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kmaq known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. Je reconnais que nous nous trouvons à Mi'kmaq, le territoire ancestral traditionnel et non cédé du peuple Mi'kmaq. Je reconnais également que les Néo-Écossais d'origine africaine constituent un peuple distinct dont l'histoire, l'héritage et les contributions ont enrichi la partie de Mi'kmaq connue sous le nom de la Nouvelle-Écosse depuis plus de 400 ans. Today you'll hear from the Commissioner of the RCMP, Commissioner Mike Duhem, and Commanding Officer of the Nova Scotia RCMP, Assistant Commissioner Dennis Daly, in relation to the final report and recommendations delivered earlier today by the Mass Casualty Commission. Commissioner Duhem will speak first, followed by Assistant Commissioner Daly. The remarks will be provided in English and then in French, and then after the remarks have been delivered, we will move into a question and answer period. Aujourd'hui, vous entendrez le commissaire de la GRC, le commissaire Mike Duhem, et le commandant de la GRC de la Nouvelle-Écosse, le commissaire adjoint Dennis Daly, au sujet du rapport final et des recommandations présentées plus tôt aujourd'hui par la Commission des pertes massives. Le commissaire Duhem prendra la parole en premier, suivi du commissaire adjoint Daly. Les remarques seront d'abord formulées en anglais, puis en français. Une fois les remarques faites, nous passerons à une période de questions et réponses. Commissioner Duhem, the floor is yours. Commissaire Duhem, la parole est à vous.
Just sit down. Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon. It is with profound emotions that I stand in front of you today, but with a firm understanding of the importance of why we are here. I'm joined by Assistant Commissioner Dennis Daly, Commanding Officer of the Nova Scotia RCMP. Before I begin, I want to note that my full remarks in both official languages will be available on the RCMP's national website. Avant de commencer, je tiens à signaler que ma déclaration complète sera publiée dans les deux langues officielles sur le site web national de la GRC. As the Commissioner of the RCMP, I want to thank the Mass Casualty Commission for its extensive work and for allowing everyone to be heard and producing a comprehensive report that was released today. The RCMP will meet the same high standards of thoroughness and transparency in our response. À titre de commissaire de la GRC, je tiens à remercier la Commission des pertes massives de son travail considérable, d'avoir donné une voix à tous et d'avoir préparé le rapport complet publié aujourd'hui. La GRC compte y répondre avec les mêmes normes élevées et la même transparence que la Commission. I'd also like to acknowledge the participants and the witnesses who contributed to this important process, in spite of how painful it was to relive and speak publicly about these events. Today, we remember Tom Bagley, Kristen Beaton, who was expecting a child, Greg and Jamie Blair, Joy and Peter Bond, Lillian Campbell, Corey Ellison, Gina Goulet, Don and Frank Golinchin, Alana Jenkins, Sean McLeod, Lisa McCulley, Heather O'Brien, Jolene Oliver, Aaron Tuck, and Emily Tuck, Constable Heidi Stevenson, Joanne Thomas, and John Zale, and Joey Weber. To their families and to the survivors and communities in the province, I'm deeply sorry for the unimaginable pain and suffering and for the traumatic events you've experienced. As police officers, we bear tremendous responsibility to keep the people and communities safe. The April 2020 mass casualty event was something we had never seen before in Canada, and I can't even imagine what you have endured. The RCMP is fully committed to rebuilding the trust and confidence of Nova Scotians. As part of these efforts, we must ensure that the vital work of the Commission will last a lasting impact on public safety. locally, nationally, and internationally. To those RCMP employees who responded to these incidents, Constable Stevenson's family, Constable Morrison, and those directly impacted, I'm sorry for your loss, for your sacrifice in the line of duty. Aux employés de la GRC qui sont intervenus durant les événements, à la famille de la gendarme Stevenson et gendarme Morrison, et à tous ceux et celles qui ont été directement touchés, je suis profondément désolé pour votre perte et vos sacrifices dans l'exercice de vos fonctions. When tragedy strikes, we are often asked if we did enough, if we could have done things differently. Through watching the events unfold, being briefed and visiting the sites of this horrific crime this week, and talking to employees who responded in the first 13 hours, I know our RCMP employees worked to the best of their abilities and did everything they could with the training and equipment they were provided. But we must learn, and we are committed to doing just that. I know our employees are dedicated to Nova Scotians, and I saw that commitment when I began my career in Nova Scotia. I've been thinking of my own experiences as a police officer and how community members and our police officers felt in April 2020. RCMP employees come to work every day wanting to make a difference. But like all first responders, we never know what the shift will hold. To Nova Scotians and Canadians, the RCMP is committed to learning from this tragedy and moving forward as a stronger organization. One of the many important issues raised during the inquiry was how the public was informed of threats in real time. I believe it is important for me to note that the RCMP has made significant advancements in the use of public alerting since this horrific incident in Nova Scotia. We now have robust national and divisional policies to help us inform the public quickly and effectively when needed. This was seen in our response to the James Smith Cree Nation tragedy in Saskatchewan, and it has had a positive impact on police agencies across Canada. We fully recognize the importance of reviewing lessons learned and continuing to improve our operations. The RCMP will follow the advice of the Mass Casualty Commission to take the time to read and process the reports and its recommendations. My senior management team and I will move forward with conviction and commitment to act on the Commission's recommendations that fall within the scope of the RCMP's authorities, and we will work closely with our safety and security partners. This will add to the work already underway to improve our service to Canadians. We will act on these recommendations just as we have applied other lessons learned since April 2020. We need to share these lessons with our partners and continue to improve how we work together to protect the safety of the public. Nous donnerons suite à ces recommandations, comme nous avons appliqué les leçons apprises depuis avril 2020. Nous devons partager ces leçons avec nos partenaires tout en continuant à améliorer nos méthodes de travail pour protéger la sécurité du public. A key priority for us is to go forward in lockstep with policing partners in Nova Scotia and across the country. We must recognize where we need to make changes, and we are grateful for the Commission for its guidance. To make sure we get this right, the RCMP has put in place a team to study the report and recommendations, to guide our action plan, and publicly report on progress. We will continue to learn from this tragedy and do better. Please know that I am committed to doing just that, along with the senior management team and all employees of the RCMP. We will keep working every day to live up to our commitment to protect the safety of communities here in Nova Scotia and across the country. Before I turn it over to Assistant Commissioner Dennis Daly, let me just conclude by reiterating my commitment to learning from this report and doing better for Nova Scotians and Canadians. Thank you for the option to speak today. Merci de m'avoir donné l'occasion de m'adresser à vous aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Commissioner Duhem. As the commanding officer of the Nova Scotia RCMP, I too want victims, families, and survivors to know that I am sorry for the pain and trauma you have suffered. The individuals who responded in April 2020 did their best while putting the safety and well-being of others ahead of their own. But I know our response wasn't what you needed it to be. And for that, I am deeply sorry. I cannot know your loss. What I hope I can do is provide assurance of our commitment to you. While we can't change what happened in 2020, we can and we will learn. And with that learning, we will improve. I echo Commissioner Duham's appreciation to the Mass Casualty Commission. The work that has been done over the last months will help guide public safety in Nova Scotia and in every community across the country, communities served by the RCMP and those served by other police services. As we noted from day one of the inquiry, the RCMP fully supported the independent mandate of the MCC to examine the incidents of April 2020. And we are here today with a promise to act on the MCC's recommendations in a manner that is transparent to the victims, survivors, and their families. With any review, areas for improvement are identified. But I want Nova Scotians and all Canadians to know that we did not wait for the release of today's MCC report to make important changes. As you heard from Commissioner Duham, since 2020, much work has been done across our organization to improve our operational capacity. Here in Nova Scotia, we enhanced resourcing for our emergency response team. We have invested in new equipment. We have opened a state-of-the-art operational communication center here in Nova Scotia. Our employees received additional training in a number of key areas. We have added to our protocols around critical incident command and management. We have worked to improve relationships with our policing partners across the province. And as Commissioner Duham noted, we have changed our approach to emergency alerting. These are a few examples of the many changes we have already implemented, and we are fully committed to more change. Informed by the MCC report and in collaboration with our partners in policing, public safety, community services, and other areas, we'll be leaning into the recommendations with the goal of making the communities we live in and work in safer. To protect and preserve life is our #1 priority. Nova Scotians, this commitment to continuous improvement is what you can expect of me as your leader of the Provincial Police Service. Thank you.
So I will now deliver Assistant Commissioner Daly's remarks in French. Je vais maintenant vous transmettre les remarques du commissaire adjoint Daly en français. Merci, commissaire Duhem. En tant que commandant de la GRC en Nouvelle-Écosse, je tiens moi aussi à dire aux familles des victimes et aux survivants que je suis désolé pour la douleur et le traumatisme que vous avez subis. Les personnes qui sont intervenues en avril 2020 ont fait de leur mieux en faisant passer la sécurité des autres avant la leur. Je sais que notre intervention n'était pas ce dont vous aviez besoin. Et j'en suis profondément désolé. Votre perte m'est impossible à concevoir. Ce que j'espère pouvoir faire, c'est de vous assurer de notre engagement envers vous. Bien que nous ne puissions pas changer ce qui s'est passé en 2020, nous pouvons apprendre et nous le ferons. Et avec cet apprentissage, nous nous améliorons. Comme l'a fait le commissaire Duhem, je tiens moi aussi à exprimer mon appréciation à l'égard de la Commission des pertes massives. Le travail accompli au cours des derniers mois contribuera à orienter la sécurité publique en Nouvelle-Écosse et dans toutes les communautés à travers le pays. Les communautés desservies par la GRC et celles desservies par d'autres services de police. Dès le premier jour des audiences, la GRC a accordé son plein soutien à la Commission des pertes massives dans son mandat indépendant d'examiner les incidents survenus en avril 2020. Et nous sommes ici aujourd'hui avec la promesse d'agir sur les recommandations de la Commission de façon transparente pour les victimes, les survivants et leurs familles. Comme pour tout examen, des aspects à améliorer sont soulevés. Mais je veux que tous les Néo-Écossais et tous les Canadiens sachent que nous n'avons pas attendu la sortie du rapport de la Commission pour apporter des changements importants. Comme le commissaire du M l'a dit, beaucoup de travail a été accompli depuis 2020 au sein de notre organisation pour améliorer notre capacité opérationnelle. Nous avons renforcé les ressources de notre groupe de tactique d'intervention. Nous avons investi dans du nouvel équipement. Nous avons inauguré une nouvelle station de transmission opérationnelle à la fine pointe de la technologie ici en Nouvelle-Écosse. Nos employés ont reçu de la formation supplémentaire dans certains domaines clés. Nous avons élargi nos protocoles entourant le commandement et la gestion des incidents critiques. Nous avons travaillé à améliorer les relations avec nos partenaires policiers à travers la province. De plus, comme l'a mentionné le commissaire du M, nous avons changé notre approche en ce qui a trait aux alertes d'urgence. Ceci n'est que quelques exemples des nombreux changements que nous avons déjà mis en œuvre. Nous sommes pleinement engagés à en effectuer d'autres. Informés par l'information contenue dans le rapport de la Commission des pertes massives et en collaboration avec nos partenaires du domaine policier, de la sécurité publique, des services communautaires et autres, nous nous penchons sur les recommandations dans le but de rendre les communautés dans lesquelles nous vivons et travaillons plus sûres. Protéger et préserver la vie est notre première priorité. Néa Écossais, cet engagement envers l'amélioration continue est ce que vous pouvez attendre de moi en tant que dirigeant de votre service de police provincial. Merci. So we will now proceed with questions and answers. We ask that you limit yourself to one question and one follow-up. For the benefit of all participants, please provide your name, the outlet you represent, and to whom your question is directed. For questions that are posed in French to Assistant Commissioner Daly, I will first translate them into English. Assistant Commissioner Daly will provide his response in English, and I will then provide the same response in French. Nous prendrons maintenant à la période de questions. Nous vous demandons de vous en tenir à une question et une autre de précision. Veuillez indiquer votre nom, l'organisation que vous représentez et à qui s'adresse votre question pour le bénéfice de tous les participants. Pour les questions posées en français au commissaire adjoint Daly, je les traduirai d'abord en anglais. Le commissaire adjoint Daly fournira sa réponse en anglais et je fournirai ensuite la même réponse en français. We will now go to the floor for questions. Nous allons maintenant passer aux questions.
Thank you. Kayla Hounsell with CBC National News. Commissioner, you've said that you're sorry for the family's pain, but are you sorry for the mistakes your officers made?
Thanks for the question, Kayla. I am terribly sorry for the pain and suffering that the families went through. It was unprecedented circumstances. You've heard the Commissioner McDonald earlier saying it's the worst case of mass killing in Canada, in the history of Canada. I am, and you've heard Assistant Commissioner Dennis Daly say that the mandate of policing is ensuring the community is safe, and on that particular day, in the circumstances that we were facing, we weren't able to keep the community safe.
But the commissioners have very clearly now said that the RCMP made mistakes, many mistakes, and they think it's so important that the RCMP be able to admit when it makes mistakes, that they think it should be policy that as a member of the RCMP, you can't get promoted unless you are willing to admit your mistakes. And I hear you here today still, after all of that, saying your officers did the best they could. So how are you going to implement this, what seems like a cultural shift, to get RCMP officers to admit when they make mistakes?
So Kayla, the first question is, as you can appreciate, the report was tabled a couple hours ago, and I have not gone through the review just yet and all the recommendations. But I am committed to go through all single recommendations. We have a team in place for the RCMP to look at every single recommendations, work with our clients and the stakeholders to make sure that we can put together a proper tracking mechanism that would be outward facing so that people can hold us accountable for what we're going to do. So I need to know, I will need to take a little bit more of a thorough read into the recommendations, and then we can go from there.
Commissioner Brett Ruskin, CBC News. It's understandable that if you didn't get an advanced copy like the participants did, that you may not know any of the recommendations. You didn't list any of the recommendations in your remarks. You said there would be a study into the report. The report's calling for a study into the RCMP. Other politicians have the benefit, politicians rather, yourself not included, politicians have the benefit of seeing this report now and studying it. There have been reports in 2007, in 2020, saying reform is needed now with the RCMP. This is a repetition of that call. This report quotes those other reports saying reform is needed. When is reform coming?
So thank you for the question. And as I mentioned to Kayla previously, yes, I am committed to go through all the recommendations. And from there, we already have a team that's going through what was published by the MCC. An action plan will be tabled, and we will be reporting of the progress on an outward-facing website in which the population can see the progress that the RCMP is doing. I think that's a good form of accountability, holding us accountable to making sure that these recommendations that have been brought forward by the MCC are followed through, and that is my commitment.
There's 130 recommendations, 75 of them deal directly with policing. Just to be clear, how many are you aware of right now?
The numbers you just shared is what was shared earlier of 130. I don't know what all the recommendations entail, but our commitment is to go through every single one of them and see if they're under my authority, our mandate. We will look at them, we will review them, and determine a way forward. If it's not under authority, we'll be working with provincial or federal representatives to make sure that we address the recommendations that were brought forth. Cool. Oui, la question c'est si j'étais au courant. Les deux questions qu'a posées ou juste la dernière? Oh, tu me rends la tâche plus difficile. La dernière, c'était au sujet si j'étais au courant du nombre de recommandations qui avaient été émises, pour lequel j'ai répondu que 2 heures avant l'événement ici, on m'a informé qu'il y avait 130 recommandations, dont 75 touchent à la police, et qu'en tant que commissaire de la GRC, je suis commis pour m'assurer le suivi des recommandations qui sont faites. Et évidemment, je n'ai pas eu le temps de revoir les recommandations à cause que ça a été déposé à midi. Mais je me suis engagé pleinement avec mon équipe d'état-major de revoir toutes les recommandations. Les recommandations qui se retrouvent en dessous de l'autorité de la GRC, mon autorité, on va poursuivre, on va faire un plan d'action et on va démontrer le progrès sur le site Internet pour lequel le public a accès pour regarder le progrès. Question d'imputabilité, puis nous garder imputables pour les actions qu'on doit prendre. Les recommandations qui ne tombent pas directement sur le mandat de la GRC, nous allons travailler étroitement, si c'est au sujet de la municipalité ou la province ou au niveau fédéral, nous allons travailler étroitement avec nos partenaires.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Lindsay Jones. I'm with the Globe and Mail. My question is for the Commissioner. Do you accept that the RCMP's mandate has grown too sprawling, resulting in poor and unaccountable police service across Canada, as the report found, or as the Commission found? And will you commit to changes in this model, starting with the shuttering of Depot in 2032?
Thanks, Lindsay, for the question. And again, I haven't seen all the recommendations or gone through all the recommendations.
Pretty big one.
But I think just saying shutting down Depot without having a proper analysis from the RCMP and other people, I think we have to have a deeper dive, if you wish, in the recommendations to have a better understanding what did the Commissioner meant by that. So I have yet to go through the recommendations. More to come, because as I said, we have a team that stood up that is actually going through the recommendations right now, and there will be an action plan to go forward.
Hi, Tim Bousquet from the Halifax Examiner. My question was actually about the depot as well. The recommendation is to close it in 9 years and replace training with a 3-year university program. I understand you to say that you need to study that recommendation, but my question to you is, if that were done, how would that affect your recruiting efforts?
Well, I wouldn't be able to, it'd be speculation on my part, the impact it would have if we shut down. But again, I think it's important to really understand what the recommendations are, and perhaps even go back to the commissioners to have a better understanding of where their mind was at. But these, just shutting down Depot within 9 years is something that we really have to sit down and discuss and see what the alternatives are.
Another one of the recommendations is that new recruits not be sent to rural areas as sort of a ladder process, and that the more suburban or larger cities are sort of the end goal of their career. What's your thought on that?
Well, the reality, Tim, is the RCMP the RCMP, the contracts that we have with the various provinces and territories, most of the work we do is in the rural areas. We're not in the big cities such as Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Calgary, and Edmonton. So most of the work that we do, the people are posted out of depot into the rural areas.
Bonjour, Adrien Blanc de Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Adrien.
Sur la question justement de dépôt, ça frappe les esprits. Vous dites qu'il va falloir évaluer qu'est-ce que ça veut dire exactement, mais la recommandation est vraiment claire, c'est-à-dire fermer dépôt d'ici 2032. Donc même si vous évaluez comment ça va se passer, aujourd'hui à Regina, il y a beaucoup de gens qui se demandent qu'est-ce que la GRC va faire concrètement dans les mois qui viennent à ce sujet.
Je pense qu'il est important, Adrien, de bien regarder c'est quoi la recommandation. Évidemment, il faut considérer c'est quoi les impacts s'il y a une fermeture de dépôt. C'était une nouvelle pour moi parce que je n'ai pas eu la chance de revoir les recommandations. Je n'ai pas eu la chance de lire le rapport encore. Mais je pense que c'est une discussion beaucoup plus large que juste une recommandation de fermer dépôt. Et puis, il va falloir les bonnes personnes autour de la table pour discuter à ce sujet.
Question sur la Nouvelle-Écosse. Il y a une recommandation de réévaluer complètement l'organisation des polices ici en Nouvelle-Écosse. On sait qu'il y a des municipalités qui se demandent si elles vont continuer leur contrat avec la GRC. Qu'est-ce que vous leur dites aujourd'hui?
I'll let Dennis, my colleague, respond specific to Nova Scotia.
So the question was relating to a recommendation related to policing, the policing model being reviewed in Nova Scotia, and that there are municipalities that are undergoing policing service reviews. And I guess what would be our response to that?
Thank you for the question. I certainly acknowledge the interest in policing here in Nova Scotia. We are right now going through at least 2 policing reviews, and I understand there may be further in the future. I welcome any type of policing review. I do look at it no differently than when I moved here to Nova Scotia a short time ago. I looked at my cable providers, and I simply looked at what delivers the best. I would say, in addition to that I'm confident the RCMP, with our training, our operations, our investigative capacity, can stand up to any police department, any police service in North America. What I heard Commissioner McDonald say this morning as he was addressing the forum was the concept of reimagining policing, community safety and well-being, and I guarantee I'm very much in favor of any sort of review that looks at all those sort of options.
Brett Ruskin, CBC News again.
Is it Brett?
Brett.
Okay, sorry. I didn't get the first time, so sorry.
I've just been speaking with Mass Casualty Commission staff, and they confirmed that the RCMP were given a copy of the report before the media was. The media received an executive summary around 9 o'clock yesterday, the full report around noon. Participants, like the RCMP, were given the full report at 9 a.m. You can respond to that as you like, but I stepped in line to share that piece of information with everyone. But
No,
you've had it for more than
yeah. I'm saying that I haven't reviewed it. It was distributed, limited distribution, but as I said from the beginning, I haven't seen the recommendations.
Hello, sir. Michael Cronish, Muse Films. I just wanted to ask a question about in the world that we live in with mainstream media and social media and water cooler conversations that are going on across Canada, to get your comments about, to speak to those Canadians who still have questions about the official narrative that's being presented today by the RCMP, be they about small things and small inconsistencies or big conspiratorial theories that do exist with this story and others.
Thanks, Michael, for the question. I mentioned earlier how the environment in which our members responded and employees responded on that particular day, the 18th and 19th of April, was one that was never seen in Canadian history. The challenges we faced with regards to the multiple crime scenes, the resources that were deployed, the fact that we were actually looking for someone who's dressed like us has never been seen before. So again, I welcome the Mass Casualty Commission's work with regards to the inquiry and the recommendations. And based on the environment that I saw yesterday and walked through and spoke with some of the first responders, I'm looking forward to really drilling down into the recommendations and looking at the way forward. We have to learn from this. I never said that we don't want to learn. We must learn from this tragic incident and get better for the next one.
Bonjour, Michel Brideau, Radio-Canada. Ma question est pour le commissaire Duhem. Il y a eu déjà des tragédies au Canada, des mortalités, des rapports, des recommandations. Pourquoi est-ce que cette fois-ci, la population canadienne peut faire confiance à la GRC que les changements seront faits?
Bonjour Michel. Il y a eu des rapports dans le passé. Je pense entre autres au rapport McNeil des incidents qui sont arrivés, tragique incident à Moncton, pour lequel les recommandations ont toutes été suivies pour l'organisation. Et ce que je vous dis, c'est que ce tragique incident, je me commets à titre de responsable de la GRC que nous allons assurer le suivi des recommandations qui sont faites. Et j'ai expliqué plus tôt que nous avons une équipe en place qui fait la revision de ces recommandations-là. Et par la suite, une fois que le plan d'action sera déterminé, il sera mis à la disponibilité de la population sur un site Internet afin qu'ils puissent regarder le progrès. Puis c'est une question également de nous tenir imputables pour les actions et le suivi au niveau des recommandations.
Et vous vous donnez combien de temps pour y arriver?
Je ne serai pas en mesure de vous donner un temps spécifique présentement. Encore là, vous avez vu la présentation de la commission, le nombre de volumes, le nombre de recommandations, ainsi de suite. Je ne veux pas m'attarder sur... je ne peux pas me commettre, si vous voulez, un temps spécifique, mais une fois qu'on a une bonne idée, il me ferait plaisir de communiquer.
On parle de 2, 5 ans, 10 ans?
Je ne sais pas. Il parle de dépôt pour 9 ans, donc.
Hi, Sarah Plowman, CTV here in Halifax. When Chief Superintendent Darren Campbell apologized to the families, saying, "I'm truly sorry that we failed you," that was really well received. So to jump on my colleague's question, why are you unwilling to apologize for the failures of the RCMP?
So I said earlier that I am sorry for what the families have gone through. And the number one mandate of any law enforcement is ensuring that the community is safe. And on that day, the challenge we face, we weren't able to keep that community safe. And for that, I am sorry.
Also on that, if, as you said, that was the best that the RCMP could do that day, how do you expect the public to trust and have confidence in the RCMP's ability if that was the best that could have been done?
What our employees faced that day was never seen in Canadian history. There's no other law enforcement agency that faced the same situation. The different incidents that were occurring, the multiple sites that had to be managed, it has never been seen before. And I said it earlier, I know that our members and employees on that day did the best that they could with the equipment and the training they have to put a stop to that as fast as possible. But it was a dynamic, fluid incident situation that took place. And again, I had a chance to talk to some of the members who were the first responders on the ground. I had a chance to drive there yesterday and go and get a sense of the layout, the roads that are there, roads that we didn't even know roads exist in certain areas. And it was challenging. It was challenging.
Alex Cook, Global News. My question's for the Commissioner. The report was highly critical of how the RCMP treated Lisa Banfield. I was just wondering if you looked at that part and if there are any lessons that can be learned about how she was treated.
So, Miss Banfield was the very first victim of this. And I know Dennis and his team have done some work with Miss Banfield. And I'll hand it over to Dennis for any further comments in regards to Ms. Banfield.
Thank you, Commissioner. I do acknowledge as well that Lisa Banfield was the first casualty of this incident. I can tell Nova Scotians that our officers who were investigating are well trained in trauma-informed approaches and would have dealt with Ms. Banfield, other victims, other survivors in a trauma-informed manner. Recognize, as you likely know, we are under some litigation with concerns to Ms. Banfield. I'm limited in what I can say. In Nova Scotia, you know, we've done significant work on intimate partner violence. We have sexual assault advocates that come into our building and review our files. We open our files to sexual assault advocates who review them, make suggestions on how we investigate, make suggestions on how we train. So we're willing to work with advocates to improve. We're looking at expanding that program from not only sexual assault files, but also the broader intimate partner violence files so that we continue to learn. So we'll look at these recommendations. And as I earlier mentioned, with the notion of community safety and well-being is extremely important to me, and I know it's important to Nova Scotians. So they have my commitment that we will look at all these recommendations.
And Commissioner, you've said that, you know, the police did the best that they could with the training that they had. Looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, what do you think could have been done differently?
Alex, again, I'm looking forward to going through the recommendations, but we did progress before even waiting for the recommendations to come out. Dennis and his team have looked at several key areas in which we've brought about change, and I'll let Dennis elaborate on some of the changes that took place.
Hindsight, you know, is important because I think we have to look back so we can look forward. So I do acknowledge that in hindsight, there are things that, you know, what we do know now. And the first instance is emergency alerting. So we've learned significant with respect to emergency alerting. We've triggered emergency alerts in Nova Scotia 18 times since April of 2020. So we've learned significance there. You know, we've updated our mapping software, access to mapping software. We've given our officers situational awareness, so there's much more. We know where our officers are outside the police car. Nova Scotia is the first division within the RCMP to get that sort of technology. We have a robust uniform disposal process in place. So we've made significant changes since. Hindsight is as they say, is 2020. What our members faced, there is no blueprint for what happened in April of 2020. Our members faced an absolutely tragic situation and impacted them severely. But it's my commitment to Nova Scotians that we will learn and we will move forward.
And if I can just add to Dennis's response, the emergency alert was one that came up frequently, and I just want to highlight the fact that the emergency alert was never used initially or intended for public safety events. And following this event, Nova Scotia has learned. Dennis said that they were the first province to use it for a public safety event, and other provinces have followed suit with using the emergency alert for other incidents, such as public safety incidents.
We'll take one more question, one more follow-up.
Hi there, it's Linda Armstrong with the Canadian Press. You mentioned a couple of times that you haven't read all the recommendations. Given that this was handed to you yesterday morning, why is that? And what you have read are your biggest takeaways?
Like I said, I haven't seen any of the recommendations. My team, I'm not quite sure at exactly what time we got the one of the versions, and I'm not quite sure if it's a full version or just the executive summary. But I'd be happy to come back to that. I haven't seen it. And I haven't gone through it.
Can I ask you why you haven't seen it?
I just haven't gone through the recommendations just yet. It doesn't minimize the impact of what took place. I just haven't had time to go through the recommendations.
One more, last question.
Thank you, I appreciate it. One of my colleagues has just sent me this finding regarding the treatment of Lisa Banfield. So the report says the RCMP's treatment of Lisa Banfield during the RCMP's H-Strong investigation is an example of the kind of re-victimization that makes it less likely that women survivors of gender-based violence will seek help from the police. It strikes me that that's the opposite of trauma-informed, first of all, but how can both things be true, and how concerned are you about that? That this is now the public message that women will be afraid to come to the police?
That is certainly not the message that we want in Nova Scotia, across the RCMP, or across the police universe. We encourage victims, survivors to come to us. What I learned this morning from Commissioner MacDonald, as a police leader, I have to act with courage and commitment and collaboration. The collaboration part is where we extend a hand to those that work in the community and the community services and strengthen those relationships so that victims, survivors, whether of intimate partner violence or any other crime, feel comfortable and confident to come to the RCMP or any police service here in Nova Scotia. So I, as a police leader, have a role in that, and I commit to strengthening those relationships with the community services. We can't do it by ourselves, and as we heard the commissioners talk about, and I haven't had the opportunity as well to read the report, but I am very interested in the notion of the community safety well-being. I heard the commissioners talk this morning that the police are asked to do things that perhaps we shouldn't be doing. So I'm very interested in continuing those discussions, anything to provide safety to Nova Scotians and Canadians.
That you haven't read the report, but I just read you that part of the report, and you've said that the treatment of Lisa Banfield was trauma-informed. The Commission says it was re-victimization. So which was it? They both can't be true.
And again, not having read the recommendation, I don't know the context. What I can tell you is that our officers treated her in a very respectful, trauma-informed. We've learned significantly on how trauma is processed through the brain and how victims, present themselves. Back when I first started, close to 35 years ago, we didn't recognize that. There'd be a lot of myths, and we've done significant training of our employees to recognize symptoms of trauma. So that's the commitment. Again, I can't answer what the recommendation said or didn't say, but again, I do recognize that Ms. Banfield was the first casualty. We are facing litigation, as I had mentioned, so I'm limited in really getting into the full story at this particular time.
Right, so that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. This concludes our media availability. Ceci conclut le point de presse. Merci de votre présence.
Thank you.
Thank you.